Hi, I'm Jules, and I run a life coaching practice in Salisbury. And as part of a podcast series that I'm making into extolling the benefits of NLP coaching, um, I would like to talk to people along the way about various aspects that I think have impact on our lives. And today, I'm actually going to introduce a very special guest onto my podcast, and he is Steve, and he is my oldest brother. And today, we're going to be talking around really the sort of chicanes of life and childhood, and how that impacts on our adulthood. I don't know where the conversation is going to go, but it will go where it will go. And I'm actually delighted to have you here, Steve. So,
Thank you.
if you wouldn't mind just a few words about yourself.
Yes, hi. Thank you for inviting me. I've been really looking forward to this opportunity. I'm Julie's eldest brother, and I'm 4 years older, and probably about 4 years less wise. I was essentially the eldest child of a family of siblings of five. Julie was the eldest girl, and two other sisters, obviously younger and a younger brother. So we have shared a lot over the years, both whilst we were growing up and subsequently. So I'd be very interested to see how this conversation goes, bearing in mind the various things that have happened to us and our family.
Thank you, and it's great to be talking with you today. What I wanted to explore, Steve, is that when we grow up, we talk about, do you remember when this happened? Do you remember when that happened? And I'm curious to really think about, do our experiences shared? Are they shared? Do we have different recollect? Why, for example, would we think that something's significant and somebody else in the family wouldn't place any significance on it, and why we bring forward what we bring forward? And I think in the work that I do, one of the basic premises of NLP is that what's happened, and actually, that's it. You can't change it. And no, we can't change it. But what we can do is we can kind of make peace with stuff, and we can change the way we look at stuff. And today, I just wanted to really take a bit of a journey back into childhood and the experience we had in growing up, and the impact that it has had on us. I've had quite a lot of I've done quite a lot of work on myself, with timeline, which has kind of made sense of everything that did happen. And I know you haven't, and I think that could be another interesting thing to talk around. So, what I really wanted to think about first, if you will, is you were the oldest,
Yes.
and how do you think and how do you feel now about certain things that maybe, and don't talk about anything you don't want to, obviously, but how do you think now about certain things that impacted on you, and how you've brought those forward, um, and with dad, with mum, um, what do you think? What do you think about, think back to when you were little?
Well, thinking back to when I was little, I have, I suppose, very strong memories um, from when I was probably 3, 4 years old, when it was just me as the child in our family. And then all of a sudden, this other baby appears on the scene, and that really changed my life considerably. Initially, not for the better, because I had been the centre of our parents' attention, aunts and uncles, grandparents, and so forth. And all of a sudden, I was having to share with this other person who I didn't know and didn't understand why that person was there, i.e. you. I have to say, I've come to love you dearly, quite quickly and persistently over the years. But that was an event which I think coloured my life from the outset, but has also stayed with me from that time. So many years. I think the other thing that is interesting and hopefully relevant to this conversation is the life memories. And I, from the earliest time, believe I have recollections of things that I think happened. Maybe they did, and in some ways I hope they did. But I don't actually know whether the memories were actually as I recall them, or whether I recall that something happened, but because I didn't like it that much, perhaps I wanted to block some of it out. And also, conversely, those things that happened that I kind of quite liked, maybe I've kind of expanded that, bigged it up in my mind, because it gives me something warmer and more fond to go back to recollect. So I think both of those things are true, and and have continued to be true for me over all the rest of my life so far.
And that's really interesting to hear you say that. So, am I right in saying that you believe that if you had a bad memory, are you doubting that you remember it, or what are you saying? Are you saying that you would use that then to? I'm not quite sure what you're saying about your
Okay.
bad memory and good memory. So you're saying about bigging up a good memory, but maybe trying to deal with a bad memory.
Yeah, I think there's definitely on numerous occasions when I've had a memory of something that's happened in my life, and I wasn't either too proud of what happened, perhaps something so I did, and I'm not that pleased about, and maybe because I think it probably hurt people badly, I tried maybe to play down the significance of that, the effect of that on those other people, because I'm not proud of it. But also, in some cases, I think I have a memory, and I wonder whether it's actually as strong as it should be, given what happened.
Thinking about stuff that's happened that wasn't so special. Am I right in thinking that you want to at some point think about it, or did you say that it's more comfortable to bury it, or are you doubting that it happened, or I'm not quite sure. I'd like you just to talk around that just a little bit of
Hmm. Okay.
the not so good memory of childhood.
Not so good memories.
Hmm.
I don't know uh, if, about certain things that I think about as recollections. I don't actually know whether they happened as I'm remembering them. And whilst that doesn't really um, happen that often, sometimes I think about a childhood memory, or a memory of my adulthood, young adulthood, and I'm thinking that couldn't really have happened. Um, and then I have to question whether it did or it didn't, because either it did something really unpleasant to somebody, and I can't believe I was that gruesome, um, or the memory is of something that I thought I really enjoyed at the time, and maybe didn't, or I did enjoy it, but it wasn't nearly as enjoyable as I'm thinking it was looking back on it. So there's the whole kind of range of things that were really grim, and I'm flowering them up in my imagination, or things that were great, and I don't quite recollect how great they were, which is a
Mm.
great shame. So when I've met somebody who I really, really enjoyed meeting, somebody who'd achieved a lot in life. I can't really remember enough. And so my memory, I think, lets me down. And I don't quite know whether I'm constructing things to make it easier for me to live without guilt, or sadly not remembering things, which actually impoverishes my thinking about my life. And maybe I did actually do something, or I did it better, or it was more fun, or there were more interesting people, or I had greater benefit to other people who are in my memory of that at that particular time.
Okay. I do get what you're saying, and I think it's really useful to kind of explore that. What I'm interested in this part of the conversation to really look at is, you said when I turned up, and then there were sort of three others followed quite quickly after me, weren't there? And I think you and
Yep.
I kind of formed a little subset in the family. I think very quickly, because of the circumstances surrounding the parents, that we kind of stuck together quite a lot, and I looked to you as a father figure. Can you recall sense of responsibility? Can you recall any sense of
I can.
needing? You can.
I can. Um, I, as I said initially, I was somewhat perturbed by your appearance, but then having started to live this part of my life with you around, and I came to understand that you and I were them, or us, and our parents were them. And since I was older than you and a bit bigger, and maybe, well, probably a bit more bulky and whatever, I saw it as my not duty, responsibility, which I enjoyed, of trying to take care of you, and for things that hurt you, to try and me to understand why that had happened and how I could help you. And sometimes I just help you by shutting up, and sometimes I actually help you by um, taking on a situation. So I don't know, confronting our parents, for example, about something, or questioning them about something, because it didn't seem right for us, didn't seem right for me, and it didn't seem right for you, because that's, I think, how our childhood was.
And do you think? I mean, saying that, it sounds to me like a big old load of responsibility for a very young child to take on the responsibility of another child. And I would at this point like to kind of just put a little bit of context into this, that we weren't sort of abused, physically abused or beaten, or well, we were beaten sometimes, but we
I'm
were.
going to say, I have a memory of that actually, which I'm not prepared to debate.
Yes, and I do too. But I think the conversations that we've had maybe more recently are of making sense that actually our parents were products of their upbringing, and their parents were products of their upbringing, and a whole lot of stuff comes out in this where it just is, and they didn't know any different. And I expect our children, talk about us as if we're the sort of worst parents in the world at times. What I'm curious to really look at is the responsibility that you had for me, which was big. I think you were walking me to school, a sort of 2.5, 3 mile walk to school when I was
Yeah,
4,
yeah.
and you would have been 8. That's a big responsibility, and I think when we look now, when we look back on things like that, having the sort of insight now to say, well, that's the way it was, can be quite a cathartic experience. But I'm curious to really look at what happens when you can't do that. What happens when maybe we struggle with that? Do you find that that's the case for you sometimes?
Yes, yes. I suppose that there's lots of various different things that happened that when we were young, such as me walking you to the bus to go to school, um, and trying to look after you. But then when I got a bit more of an understanding why I was doing it, I guess I probably accepted it more than maybe I did at the start. I'm thinking, well, why am I taking my little sister to school? She got a pair of legs of her own. She can get there. Because I was very young myself, I didn't understand really what I was being asked or expected to do. But then I had to kind of modify my thinking to ensure that I was actually looking after you, um, because you were my sister, and I was exceedingly fond of you. And although I found it a bit of a chore sometimes to do things that like walking you to school or helping you out at home or whatever, um, I realised that that's something that I should be doing, but I really did actually like it, and I appreciated the responsibility and helping you.
So when
And
it
as
comes to, sorry, Steve, when it comes to the responsibility of looking after a little child when you're a child yourself and a very young child, as I said before, there is an air of, well, it was what it was, what it was. But if we were able to look back on those times, as if to say, well, what have we learnt from it? What could we take from that? One could argue that'd be quite useful experience to be able to do that. Say, well,
well,
what have
yeah,
I learnt from it?
yeah, no, I was going to say I think it shows me that we are very adaptable to our circumstances, and circumstances not only physical things that happen around us for which sometimes we have a responsibility, but also uh, the things around us by and that I mean um, how we view what's going on. And so um, taking those sort of life events into consideration and putting them in perspective, I think that some were generally quite rewarding and interesting over time, and recollecting them is proved very interesting. But also thinking of things that did happen, which I would rather have not happened. And I'm not. So when we're talking about memories, we are talking about recollecting memories, um, and various triggers that causes them to come into our heads. Uh, Sometimes I think that some of the memories I actually hang on to because they remind me how hurt I was about something at a time, and I'm just not forgiving whoever it was that caused the hurt, because to me the hurt was so immense. Why should I forgive? So that's another aspect of the memory. It might not be absolutely true.
So it's a useful. So there is a secondary gain there, is there? As a benefit
Yes.
to. So why would you think then? So as a child, I mean, you're referring back to presumably when you were a child. How do you think that holding on to that memory now? What do you think is the benefit of it? And I know you're saying that it enables you to still feel, sort of,
Mm.
resentful or angry with somebody. What do you think is the benefit of that? What's the secondary
Mm.
gain in that?
Okay, I think the that as an experience is something that I found valuable to repeat over the years. Uh, and a good example is when, for example, I've been in a meeting and because I've been in meetings where people have tried to do things which about which I've had a dim view, for example, and I rather prevent it from happening again. It's an experience I've had, and I'm thinking, so how did I benefit, or how did I deal with it last time, to my benefit and hopefully the benefit of other people who may well have also been there at the time. So a memory of childhood, in a way, is just another section or another compartment of memories that I've accumulated over many years. And some of those memories of childhood have stood me in good stead as a young adult or as an older adult. And some of them I've thought, well, I could just forget about that because that's of no real value at all, because I don't really feel I need it in the future. You know, it's a bit like, well, why do I keep thousands of emails, which are probably from people I've never, ever intend to speak with again. And sometimes I think, well, I keep that as a memory because I enjoyed speaking with them, spending time with them. But also it's a reference point for something that might have happened to me in my life, to either show me what happened and how I avoided it, or it was just funny. It was just yeah.
So thank you for that. So going back to being a child, going back to when we were kids growing up together. Why do you think it's useful? And you've said that you've found it quite useful to hang on to some of the negative stuff, so that it reminds you of the fact that you're still angry with somebody. Why do you think that is? Why would you see a benefit in that?
Because it reminds me of something that I didn't like, perhaps was hurtful. But it reminds me, because having moved forward from that point, because I'm still here, I've built up memories of how I dealt with it. And if I see a similar situation galloping towards me over the brow of the hill, I'm forewarned because it's coming, and I'm also forearmed. Because although that might not be a particularly frequent event, it has proven to be very useful. So I think that's just another flavour of a memory, a different type of memory that I've got stuffed away in my library of memories. You know, some are fiction, some are history, some are natural science.
But different memories.
Yeah.
But as we were growing up together, you know, as I said before, we then had 3 siblings follow on quite quickly after me. I think there was just over a year after me before the next sister, and then the next sister, and then the brother. How I'm just interested now to think, how were you feeling then? Were you more disassociated? Were you more associated? How were you feeling then?
I think having had the experience of having had a sister come onto the scene, and having got to the point where I quite liked that, and were very fond of that situation. When another sister arrived, I'm thinking, well, it's another sister. And I guess it's probably going to be as good as the experience I've had with this, or have with this sister. And because I couldn't see any reason to think otherwise, because a sister coming onto the scene when I was 4 was pretty traumatic. But having realised that a lot of that dissipated, and had been turned into something good, I'm thinking, okay, so another sister on the scene. I know what the sister is about, so this one hopefully is going to be as good as the one I've already got. And I guess it proved to be so, but different. And the same was true when when my third sister, and your second sister came along. it was just as good, but different, because they had different personalities, and they were reacted to by our parents and relatives and friends in slightly different ways. And so that kind of was interesting to me, because I'm thinking, well, we are all actually different people. And although we may well have been experienced, fighting over food at the dinner table, the one person who had their food nicked has undoubtedly got a different recollection of it of the person who successfully did the nicking, which
I think
which which did
well,
happen.
I think you won most of those, but from memory. But
Well, I was a bully.
when 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 you think about now, and I'm really sort of interested to think about the impact that growing up had on us now. Um, we all have different views of. I mean, we've lost our parents, so we we haven't got the parents here now. But when we share memories of the parents, I think sometimes it can be quite disconcerting when siblings have different memories of the parents, maybe more rose-hued, if you like, rose-tinted memories of the parents. Do you feel that that inhibits you if you have a less than favourable memory?
It has done, and probably will continue to do so. So when you, for example, have talked about um, some experiences you've had with our parents, um, and I also shared that experience. So going out, for example, somewhere which was often traumatic in the car, um, I guess I probably share your memory of it, because it was rather a challenge. But also there are some things that I think that happened where I think you were probably uh, either adversely affected, or you were very pleased, and I took the diametrically opposed view, because it was something that you liked and I didn't like either happening to you, or I'm thinking, well, why isn't that happening to me as well? And we're
Mm.
maybe jealous. So there's all kind of different uh, types of uh, thinking going on, of things that happened, and I think, well, why did that happen, and why was I not upset by it when clearly you were? But if it was directed at you, I guess you would probably be more upset than me. If you were getting told off, and I thought that you deserved it, good telling off, then I'd probably just sit back and be a bit smug that you were getting the grilling or the roasting. Um, but then sometimes I thought, well, because I sometimes felt a distinct lack of um, fairness was we were experiencing. I'm thinking, well, that's not right, and I would get involved somehow. I'd actually be naughty to distract attention, and I can remember doing that, or I would just change the subject and say, oh, we did so and so and so and so, and to try and take a bit of the heat out of the situation. And I also have recollections of that, uh, particularly when we were at meal table, because that was a good opportunity for those kind of things to occur. Particularly was a family meal on Sunday, and that was sometimes extremely funny, at your expense or my expense, or a sister or brother's expense, or we all shared the joke about what had gone on, and it was perhaps to the disadvantage of either our mum or our dad. And it was a shared experience, and I guess we probably got shared memory, but we don't necessarily all remember those things because we don't have the right triggers.
And I think to me, it's quite apparent that when we look back to childhood, I'm always really curious to explore why we hang on to the memories we do, albeit most memories are buried. I mean, there's so many memories buried that we don't even know what's there. And I'm just curious to sort of really explore why we pull them out when we pull them out. I mean, what
Mm.
purpose do they serve? And I think you've said, you've kind of used yours consciously as a bit of a guard when something comes over the hill that you might not be liking.
Yes,
So you pop yourself back in that memory to give you some sort of safety. I think I'm equally sort of keen to think that perhaps that could be used with good memories as well. Um, Albeit sometimes they do get overshadowed by the not so good memories, don't they? And
they do.
I mean, I think we both agree when we talk that childhood is brutal. Growing up is brutal, and if it doesn't kill you, it makes you strong. And I think that's probably, a lot to be said, a lot to be said for that train of thought. But I think for me, growing up with you and looking to you to be the savior and looking for you to be the father figure, um, really what was key in my understanding of how somebody should behave towards somebody else. So I use that as a positive experience, very much so that, I can be looked after, I can be cared for. I think for you, you were at the other end of that. So you were the looker after, if you will, and you were the one that was expected to, sort of care for me and do all the things for me. So I guess you've got a completely different set of, recollect from that. Do you think that there's benefit in, really unpacking and exploring that at some point to think, well, it happened, I can't change it. That's the way it was, and I can leave it behind. Because pulling out memories that maybe aren't quite so helpful can have a secondary gain, can't they? They can have a sort of secondary benefit. But if we kind of make sense of them and just leave them behind, do you think there's a benefit to that?
I think there is a benefit to leaving something behind. In a way, it's a bit like screwing up and throwing away an old newspaper. But equally, so I actually understand what you're saying, and I wholeheartedly agree. But equally, I snip stuff out of newspapers, and I hang on to stuff. Often, I perhaps never, well, generally, I don't refer to it ever again, because when I read something, I do tend to retain quite a lot of information. But equally, there are things that I've written down in a day book 5, 10 years ago, and I get the day book out, and I think, yes, I understand that now. I didn't understand it at the time, but something else has just happened to make me question my interpretation of what happened, and I'll go back and do that. Bit sad, I suspect, but it helps me to go forward, because everything is based on what's happened.
Okay.
Because
Which
we
is
haven't
which,
got to stuff that hasn't happened yet. So, so
and
yeah.
that's an interesting concept. One which kind of isn't married up very much to what I believe in and what I do, which is why I was quite keen to talk with you today. Because my belief is that, once it's happened, and that's it, and we make sense of it and then move on. Um, and not, I don't use things as triggers. I think, well, they happened, and I think it gives you a much more sort of holistic view of life in general and growing up. Um, but I think that's why I was so interested to talk with you about shared experience, about stuff that you go through when you've got parents that are perhaps, lacking in certain departments and great in other departments.
Indeed,
Uh,
yes.
do you think there's any benefit in looking at, as we grow up, into having shared conversations with siblings to actually make sense of what's happened rather than carrying it by ourselves?
Um, I think there's value in um, looking at all sorts of different things about our lives and our siblings' lives and those of our parents and relatives and friends, I suppose, because we all have different lives, and the way that the things that we meet on that sort of journey through life. Um, I know I've met stuff that none of you guys will ever meet, either because it doesn't happen anymore, um, or um, it was something that just happened because of a set of circumstances I happened to either engineer, or I was just involved in, either as as an innocent party or as a willing collaborator. And I think the fact that we have memories both helps us to um, see how perhaps to deal with a situation that we've come across before, uh, or how to avoid a certain situation that we've come across before, and with the most impact of that, the benefit of those two different approach or views, is it helps us to avoid danger, and it also helps us to generate more joy. Because I
I
think
think
we had a lot of joy as a family. We had a lot of pain as a family, but I guess that's probably no different to every other family on the planet. Ours was just of a different type. We had different dollops of fun at Christmas than other families, and we had different dollops of um, sharing good food than other families, and we had recollections of having not so good family holidays, for example, as other families. So I won't say we were any worse off. We have just different views, and a lot of things that we have done have been better out or worse than others. But a guide to where we're going and other people that I think we want to influence and to help, perhaps.
I think what you're saying is very, very interesting. And going back to when you said about learned responses to deal with other situations, there's a train of thought that we still have an inherent fight or flight um,
Yes.
thing buried in us, and I think that sometimes we can cherry pick the memories that we want to use as armory, and I think perhaps it's quite a nice thing to explore sometimes. That actually you can really really get rid of bad memories, because you don't actually need them. They make sense, and get rid of them, blast them away, and then actually install a new program. And I think it's a bit like I think you call it a defrag, don't you, or something on a computer. And I say get rid of apps and load other apps on. If something's
Mm,
not serving us well, then I think it's a good argument to say ditch it and move on. But I
I
think
agree.
it's been really interesting talking with you, and I hope you've enjoyed talking with me.
I certainly have, and I'm looking forward to doing it more, because I don't think we've really done it enough over the years.
No, I agree.
We have so many good shared memories and so many other not so good shared memories, and maybe um, I would and could and should benefit from your help in trying to maybe put some of these things into perspective, and maybe hopefully I could perhaps help you in a similar fashion.
Yeah, I'm sure so.